The sky over the alien world of Dravara was purple, with clouds that moved like flowing rivers. Strange creatures flew across the sky, and the air smelled of metal and flowers. It was not Earth. It was something wild, something ancient. Nick stepped out of the transport ship. He was one of the first humans chosen for the Unity program, a peace mission to live and learn from other advanced species. He looked around with calm eyes, but inside, he felt nervous. This was a warrior planet, and humans weren't known for being strong here. A tall figure stood ahead. She was Dravari, tall, with green armor that shimmered in the light. Her skin was smooth and silver blue. Her long black hair was braided down her back, and her glowing eyes were locked onto him. This was Zalira, a famous warrior of her kind. Lyra crossed her arms and walked toward him. Her steps were heavy, confident. "You are the human?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. Nick gave a friendly smile. "Yep, name's Nick." She studied him for a moment, then gave a cold laugh. "You don't look dangerous. Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," he said, still smiling. "I came here to learn. Maybe even surprise you." "You can't satisfy me," she said quickly. "Not in strength, not in spirit. You're kinda soft. You break easily, and you give up." Nick raised his eyebrows but didn't respond with anger. Instead, he tilted his head. "Sounds like you've met the wrong humans." "I've met enough," Zalira said. "Prove me wrong, then." Nick shrugged. "All right, where do we start?" She stared at him. No fear, no arrogance, just calm. She didn't like it. She was used to fear, or at least some respect. But this human looked at her like she was just another person, not a powerful warrior. Lyra decided to test him right away. "Follow me," she said. They walked out into the wild hills of Dravara. The ground was rough and full of sharp stones. Tall, red trees swayed in the wind. Small creatures hissed and ran between the rocks. Zalira moved fast, but Nick kept up, his boots crunching behind her. "This is a path we use for strength trials," she said. "You will carry this pack." She dropped a heavy metal bag in front of him. Nick bent down, tested the weight, and gave a short whistle. "This thing's like carrying a baby elephant." "What is that?" Zalira asked, confused. "Never mind, just a saying." He threw the strap over his shoulder and followed her again. The bag pulled at his back, and sweat started forming on his forehead. His legs hurt, but he didn't complain. He kept going. Lyra glanced back. "You can drop it any time, human." "Nah, I'm good," Nick replied. After a while, he slipped on a rock and fell hard on his side. Zalira turned and watched. "You're done?" she asked. Nick lay there for a second, then slowly sat up, rubbing his arm. "That hurt," he said with a laugh. "But no, I'm not done." He stood, lifted the pack again, and kept walking. Lyra frowned. She didn't expect this. Most off-worlders would have quit. She walked slower now, keeping pace with him. After an hour, they reached a small rest station built into a cave. "We stop here," she said. "You may rest." Nick dropped the pack and sat with a loud sigh. "Thanks. Didn't think my first day would be a workout." Zalira sat across from him. "You're not weak," she admitted. "But this is only one test." Nick looked at her. "You really think humans are that useless?" "Not useless," Zalira said. "Just less. Your bodies are soft. Your minds are too open. You want peace too often. And that's bad." She didn't answer. Nick leaned back. "Maybe you're right about some humans. But strength isn't just about muscles and armor." She narrowed her eyes. "What is it about, then?" "Endurance," he said. "Heart. Staying kind even when people judge you." For a moment, Zalira didn't speak. She wasn't used to people talking like this, especially not to her. She had always been feared, respected, never questioned. But Nick, he wasn't trying to challenge her. He wasn't trying to win. He was just being himself. And somehow, that bothered her more than anything. She stood. "Rest well, human. Tomorrow, we test your mind." Nick smiled up at her, looking forward to it. As she walked away, she glanced back at him. He sat there, tired and sore, but with a calm expression on his face. No fear, No doubt, for the first time in her life, Celera didn't know what to make of someone. And deep inside, a small thought whispered in her mind, what if I was wrong? The next morning, the sky over Dravara turned gold. Nick stepped out of the cave, stretching his arms. His body ached from carrying that heavy pack yesterday, but he was still smiling. He had survived the first trial. XA Lyra was already waiting for him, standing tall with her arms crossed. Her armor glowed faintly in the morning light. She didn't say much. Instead, she turned and walked. Nick followed without a word. They passed through long stone corridors and finally entered a large circular room. The walls were made of smooth black crystal, and strange blue lights floated in the air. In the center stood a tall pillar with glowing symbols that kept changing. Nick raised an eyebrow. Okay, what's this? The thinking ring, Celera said. This test will show your mind's strength, strategy, memory, control. If you fail, you will be removed from the Unity program. Nick gave a short laugh. No pressure. Hutchie didn't smile. You will face the Archive's sentience. It will test you with problems we train our young warriors to solve. If you truly want to prove yourself, then stand in the circle. Nick stepped forward. The floor under his boots lit up, and the room suddenly grew colder. A soft voice echoed from all directions. Human registered. Trial begins. Nick stood still. 3 glowing orbs floated before him. Each one showed a different problem, one with shapes, one with numbers, and one with maps of stars. He started with the shapes. They twisted and moved, forming a puzzle that made no sense at first. He stared at it, blinking fast. All right, brain, time to show off. Celera stood outside the ring, arms folded. Her eyes never left him. She expected confusion, maybe panic. Instead, Nick leaned in, squinting, muttering to himself. This fits here. That goes there. Okay. After a few minutes, the puzzle snapped into place. A small chime rang. First phase complete. Second phase begins. The star maps were harder. Nick stared at unfamiliar constellations. The voice asked him to find a safe path through dangerous space zones using gravity and fuel limits. He sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing invisible lines in the air with his finger. Celera raised one eyebrow. What was he doing? Nick mumbled to himself. Can't go through black hole cluster. Slingshot past the moon belt. Yeah, maybe. Minutes passed. Then, suddenly, he clapped his hands. Got it. Second phase complete. Final test begins. The last orb showed a small alien village under threat from pirates. Resources were low. Defenses were weak. He had to find a way to protect them without violence. Celera leaned forward. This one was important. Her people believed true warriors solve problems with strength. Nick had no weapons. How would he handle it? He paced slowly. Okay, we hide the resources, make fake signals to draw pirates away, set traps that scare, not hurt, and contact nearby ships to fake a rescue mission. Solution accepted. The lights dimmed. The voice returned. Human past, mental flexibility, high, emotional control, stable, creativity, above average. Nick stepped out of the ring, wiping sweat from his forehead. That was wild. Celera stared at him. You passed? Yeah, I guess my brain didn't betray me. He joked. She looked at him differently now. She had tested his strength. Now his mind. And both times, he didn't quit, didn't break. And he didn't brag. You use peace, Celera said. No force. No war strategy. Sometimes the best fights are the ones you avoid, he replied. She tilted her head. Most warriors here wouldn't agree. Nick smiled. Then maybe your world needs a few weird humans. Celera turned away for a moment. Her chest felt strange, like something warm was building inside. She had always believed strength was shown through power, speed, and domination. But this human, he was calm, careful, but still strong. As they walked outside, Celera stopped. Tomorrow's test will be different. Another mind game? Nick asked. She shook her head. No. Something deeper, more personal. Should I be scared? Yes, she said. But her voice was softer now. Not a warning, just a truth. Nick nodded. All right, See you tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Celera watched him walk away. She didn't understand why, but she was looking forward to tomorrow. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure what would happen next. The next day, the skies over Dravara were cloudy and heavy. A cold wind moved through the trees, making the leaves shiver. Nick stood outside the old stone tower, waiting. He had been told to come alone. No armor, no tools. Just himself. Lyra appeared at the entrance, quiet and serious. She wore a long gray cloak instead of her usual armor. Her eyes were calm, but there was something else there, something deeper. "What's the test today?" Nick asked with a nervous smile. "Not a test," she said. "A trial." "That sounds even worse." Lyra nodded once, then motioned for him to follow. They entered the tower. The inside was dark, with glowing crystals lighting the floor. They walked down a spiral path, deeper and deeper, until the air felt colder. Nick noticed the silence. Even their footsteps didn't echo. They stopped before a large, round door made of black stone. "This is the Chamber of Memory," Lyra said. "You will face a vision from your past. Not a dream, but a reflection, real, sharp, and honest." Nick frowned. "You mean my worst memory?" She nodded. "Many warriors break inside. Others run. Few accept what they see." "And what about you?" he asked softly. "I passed. Barely." Nick took a breath and stepped toward the door. "Once you enter, I cannot help you," Lyra warned. "You must face it alone." "Figures," he muttered. Then, with one last look at her, he walked through the door. Inside, the chamber felt like a frozen breath. The room was round, with no furniture, just walls that shimmered like water. Then, without warning, the light bent and the past came alive. Nick stood on Earth again. But it was a bad day. A memory he had tried to bury. He was in a hospital hallway. The air was still. His younger self sat on a bench, head down, eyes red. A nurse walked past him without a word. The room was quiet. The older Nick stepped closer, watching the scene play out. He remembered this moment. It was the day his sister passed away after a long illness. He had promised to visit that day, but he had arrived too late. "I failed her," younger Nick whispered. Older Nick felt the old pain rising again. He wanted to speak, to comfort that younger version, but he couldn't change the past. He could only face it. The vision shifted. Now he saw himself yelling at his parents during the funeral, angry, ashamed, broken. It hurt to watch, but he didn't look away. Then the light faded, and he was alone again in the empty chamber. The door opened. Lyra stood there, waiting. Nick walked out slowly. His eyes were wet, but his face was calm. "You saw it," Lyra said. He nodded. "Yeah, and you didn't run." "I wanted to," Nick said honestly, "but running wouldn't change what happened. I had to face it, accept it." Lyra studied him closely. His voice was steady. His hands didn't shake. He had walked through memory and come back stronger. "You carry pain," she said. "Everyone does." He replied, "Some just hide it better." They stood there in silence. The cold wind brushed through the hallway. Finally, Lyra spoke again. "You are not like the other humans I've met. Is that a good thing? I'm still deciding." They both smiled a little. Later, as they walked through the open field outside the tower, Nick looked up at the sky. "So what now? You've passed 3 trials," Lyra said. "Many Dravari wouldn't have. And yet, I still can't lift half the stuff you carry in training," Nick joked. "Strength comes in many forms," she replied. He looked at her, surprised. This was the first time she had said something like that. Her voice wasn't full of judgment anymore. It was softer, respectful. "You're changing your mind about me, aren't you?" he asked. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "Tomorrow will be different again. We will go to the heart of Dravara. More walking, no." Lyra said, "More truth." Nick raised an eyebrow but didn't press for more. As the sun began to set, casting orange light over the land, Lyra walked ahead. Nick followed her, both of them quiet. Something between them was shifting. The warrior who once doubted humans was starting to see something unexpected in one. And the human who came to learn was slowly becoming something more. The next morning, the sky was soft and gray, with a quiet breeze passing through the stone city of Dravara. Birds with glowing feathers flew above, and distant bells rang from temple towers. Nick walked beside Zalira as they headed toward the oldest part of the city. The path led them through tall arches carved with symbols. Strange statues stood on both sides, shaped like warriors and beasts. Nick looked around, clearly impressed. So, this is the heart of Dravara? He asked. Lyra nodded. This is where our history lives, where our leaders are chosen, and where our truths are spoken. They entered a wide circle made of white stone. In the middle was a small platform with 4 steps. Surrounding the circle were watchers, elders of the Dravari people. They sat in silence, their eyes fixed on Nick. Should I be worried? Nick whispered. Yes, Zalira said. This is not a test of body or mind. This is about your purpose. An old Dravari elder stood and raised one hand. Human, he said, you have past strength, mind, and memory. Now we ask, why are you truly here? Nick stepped forward and looked around. So many eyes were watching him. He took a deep breath. I didn't come to prove humans are better. He began. I didn't come to defeat your ways. I came to understand, to connect, and maybe show you something different. Another elder asked, what can you offer that we do not already have? Nick thought for a moment. You have great warriors, powerful minds, rich traditions. But sometimes strength grows from kindness, from helping without asking for reward, from choosing peace when war is easy. Humans are not perfect, but we try, and that effort matters. The circle was quiet. One of the younger elders frowned. Words are easy. What proof do you offer? Nick looked at Zalira. She gave him a small nod, as if saying, go on, speak your truth. A long time ago, Nick said, my people were divided. We fought over land, ideas, even colors. But we learned, we grew. We built something better not because we were strong, but because we dared to hope. And I see that same chance here. Zalira stepped beside him now. The elders turned their eyes to her. I was the one who doubted him most, she said. I thought he was weak, unworthy. But he has shown heart, spirit, and patience. He did not try to beat us. He tried to understand us. The oldest elder looked at Nick. You were judged before you spoke, and still, you stayed. Yeah, Nick replied. People judge what they don't know. But I wasn't here to impress. I was here to learn. After a long pause, the elder nodded once. Then let the record show that the human has passed the 4th trial. His purpose is understood. A low hum filled the circle as the elders placed their hands on their hearts in respect. Nick looked surprised, even a little emotional. Zalira glanced at him. You did well, she said. Thanks, he replied. You didn't look so scary this time. She rolled her eyes. Don't get used to it. As they walked out of the circle together, Zalira spoke again. You speak with feeling. That's rare here. Humans have a habit of talking too much, Nick said with a grin, and listening to little. I tried to be different. They passed under the last arch, walking back toward the city square. The people of Dravar moved aside as the two walked together. It was not common to see a human beside a warrior, especially one like Zalira. I'm still curious, Nick said. When did you first hate humans? Zalira stopped walking. Her eyes looked far away for a second. Years ago, a human ship passed through our space. It broke rules, ignored warnings, and in the end, lives were lost. Nick's face grew serious. I'm sorry. Not your fault, she said. But it stayed with me. I thought all humans were like that, careless, and now, I'm not sure what I think anymore. They stood quietly for a while. The wind picked up slightly, brushing dust along the path. Tomorrow, Zalira said, we leave the city. There's one final trial. Let me guess, Nick said. I have to fly through a volcano while solving puzzles. She smiled slightly. No, but it will test something deeper. Your truth. Nick gave her a thoughtful look. All right, I'll be ready. As they walked into the fading sunlight, something between them had changed. The warrior who had once looked at him with doubt now walked beside him like an equal. And the human, once judged by the galaxy, had started to earn something no test could give trust. The next morning was cold and silent. The sky above Dravara had turned pale blue, with slow-moving clouds that looked like soft waves. Nick waited near the transport pad, dressed in a simple travel suit. His bag was light, but his thoughts were heavy. This was the final trial. XA Lyra arrived quietly. She no longer wore armor. Instead, she wore a long robe, a sign of personal journey. Her expression was calm, but her eyes had a storm hiding behind them. "Ready?" she asked. "Probably not," Nick replied. "But let's go anyway." They entered a small shuttle that flew low across the wild lands of Dravara. The journey was quiet. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It felt like waiting before something important. After some time, the shuttle landed in a wide open field, surrounded by tall glowing trees. In the center stood a tall stone structure shaped like a flame. Round it were empty seats made from white crystal. The place felt sacred. Nick stepped out and looked around. "This place feels different." "It is," Zalira said. "This is where we speak the truth. Not to others, but to ourselves." Nick looked confused. "You mean, like a confession?" "Something like that," Zalira replied. "You will enter the flame chamber. You'll be alone. No illusions this time. Just silence and your own truth. And what do I do in there? You speak. Whatever's real. Whatever's inside." Nick took a breath. "That sounds harder than all the other tests." "It is," she said. "Most fail because they try to lie to themselves." Nick stepped slowly toward the stone flame. The door opened as he neared. The inside glowed with soft orange light. He looked back once at Zalira, who simply nodded. He entered. Inside, the room was warm. The walls were smooth and the floor reflected his image. No sounds, no voices, just stillness. He sat down and closed his eyes. After a while, he began to speak, his voice low. "I came here because I wanted to make peace. But part of me also wanted to be seen, to be respected. I grew up in a world where humans always had to prove themselves, always had to shout to be heard. And maybe I'm tired of shouting." He paused. "I was scared when I came here, scared I'd fail, scared I'd be laughed at. And when Zalira said I couldn't satisfy her expectations, it hurt. But I didn't want to fight her. I wanted to show her there's more to us than power." He opened his eyes slowly. "I'm not the strongest. I'm not the smartest. But I try. And I care. Maybe that's enough." The room remained quiet. Outside, Zalira waited. The wind moved through the glowing trees. She stared at the flame, wondering what Nick was saying inside. She had been through this place herself once, years ago, and it had broken her. Then the door opened. Nick stepped out. His face looked the same but calmer, like something inside him had become still. XA Lyra walked toward him. "You spoke your truth." "Yeah," he said. "Not easy, but honest." She looked at him carefully. "Then you have passed." Nick smiled a little. "Feels weird, like I didn't do anything special." "Truth is always special," she said softly. They walked together through the glowing forest. The light was dim now, the sun slowly setting behind the hills. Small creatures made soft noises in the distance. "You said something the first day," Zalira said. "You said maybe I had met the wrong kind of humans. I remember. Maybe you were right." Nick raised his eyebrows. "Is that an apology?" "No," Zalira said, smirking. "Just an observation." He laughed. "I'll take it." As they reached the edge of the forest, Zalira stopped. "Nick, I want to say something important." He turned to her, surprised by her serious tone. "You have done what I thought was impossible," she said. "You showed me strength in peace, and in weakness. But it was never weakness, was it? Just a different kind of power." Nick looked at her quietly. "Thank you," she said. He didn't respond right away. Then, with a warm smile, he said, "You're welcome." The two stood there as the sky turned orange, a warrior and a human. Both changed in ways neither of them expected. And somewhere deep inside Zalira's heart, she knew her first judgment had been wrong, and now she didn't want him to leave. The days after the final trial passed slowly. Nick stayed at the guest quarters near the High Garden of Dravara. People greeted him with nods, now something that never happened before. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was someone they talked about in whispers. Someone who had passed all four trials. But Nick didn't feel proud. Not fully. He kept thinking about Zalira, about her voice, her stare, and the way she had changed during their time together. She hadn't spoken much since the truth chamber, and that silence bothered him more than he liked to admit. One evening, while the sky turned dark blue and stars blinked to life, Zalira appeared at the edge of the garden. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, watching the flowers move in the wind. Nick stood up and walked over. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I was thinking," she said without turning her head. "About how wrong I was." Nick tilted his head. "About what?" "You," she said. "Humans, and myself." He didn't answer. He knew she wasn't finished. "I judged you the moment I saw you," she said. "Weak, small, soft. I told myself you couldn't satisfy my standards. But now I understand that I didn't even know what those standards meant." Nick looked up at the stars. It's easy to expect something until someone shows you something better. "You're not stronger than me," she said. "I know." Nick replied. "You're not faster, not sharper. You don't fight like us." "Still true," he said with a smile. She finally looked at him. "But you see things we don't. You hear what we ignore. And you keep going, even when everything says you should quit." Nick shrugged. "Maybe it's just stubbornness." "No," Zalira said. "It's something else, something deeper. And I don't know what to do with it." Nick gave a quiet laugh. "You don't have to do anything." "But I want to," she said. Nick turned toward her. "What do you mean?" Zalira looked down at her hands, then back at him. "I've fought many battles, trained with the best, traveled across 10 worlds. But this understanding someone, trusting them, it's harder than all of that." Nick nodded slowly. "I get that. And still, you stayed," she whispered. "Even when I pushed you away." He looked into her eyes. They were softer now, unsure, real. "You're not the only one who was afraid," Nick said. "I came here expecting to fail. I thought you'd tear me apart on day one." "I almost did." They both laughed quietly. Zalira stepped closer now, her voice quieter. "You've changed me, human. And that scares me." "Change always does," Nick said. "But it's usually worth it." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Zalira reached out and touched his shoulder. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "We don't have to know," he replied. "We just keep walking." She nodded, her fingers still resting gently on his arm. "You surprised me, Nick, from the very first step. You told me I couldn't satisfy you," he teased. She rolled her eyes. "Don't remind me." "Too late." Zalira sighed but smiled. "Maybe I judged too quickly. Maybe I let my fear speak louder than truth." Nick's voice was quiet. "I think we all do that sometimes." The stars above twinkled as if listening. The garden swayed with the wind, and something new settled between them, something that had nothing to do with trials, or power, or test. Just connection. "The council wants to honor you tomorrow," Zalira said. "You'll be remembered in our records." "Sounds official," Nick said. "But I'd rather remember this, you, here, not wearing armor, not testing me, just being honest." Zalira took a breath. "Then let me say this clearly. You've satisfied more than just expectations, Nick. You've reached something deeper, something even I didn't think existed in me." Nick said nothing. He just stepped forward and stood beside her. Their shoulders touched lightly, but neither moved away. As the night grew darker and the stars shined brighter, a warrior and a human stood in stillness, no longer opponents, not even allies, but something more. And for the first time in her life, Zalira didn't feel alone. The great hall of Dravara was filled with quiet energy. Tall stone pillars stood in rows, and light from glowing crystals washed over the smooth floors. The seats were full. Elders, warriors, teachers, and students all gathered to witness something rare. Nick stood at the center of the hall, feeling small but not afraid. He wore a simple robe given to him by the council, It was marked with the 4 symbols of the trial of strength, mind, memory, and truth. His heart beat slowly, calmly. Xa Lyra stood to the side, her arms crossed, watching him closely. But this time, her eyes were not cold or doubtful. They were proud. A tall elder stepped forward. His voice echoed through the chamber. Nick of Earth, you came to us as a stranger. Many expected you to fail, but you passed the trials not with force, but with something else, something we had forgotten. Nick didn't speak. He just listened. You reminded us, the elder continued, that true strength can be quiet. That courage can come from kindness, and that peace can be just as powerful as any weapon. The room remained silent. No one cheered. No one clapped. This was not a celebration of noise, it was a moment of meaning. The elder raised his hand. We welcome you, not just as a visitor, but as someone who changed us. Nick bowed his head. When the ceremony ended, the people began to leave, whispering among themselves. Some nodded to Nick as they passed, others smiled. One young warrior even touched his own chest in respect, a Dravari sign of deep honor. Zalira walked up to Nick slowly. You stood still, she said, even when so many eyes were on you. Wasn't easy, Nick replied, but I've had tougher days. They walked out of the hall together, passing through the grand arches, into the open air. The sky above was bright and full of soft white clouds. You're leaving soon, aren't you? Zalira asked. Yeah, Nick said. A shuttle comes tomorrow. She was quiet for a moment, and after that, back to Earth. Back to normal life, I guess. And this, she asked, turning to face him. Was this just part of your mission? Nick shook his head. No, this became something more. Zalira looked away. I didn't expect that. Me neither. They stood near a tall tree with silver leaves. The wind moved through the branches, and the leaves made a soft chimming sound. Zalira, Nick said slowly, you once told me I couldn't satisfy your expectations, that I wasn't enough. I remember. She said softly, but the truth is, he continued, you challenged me in ways no one ever has. You made me look deeper, become better, and somewhere along the way, you became important to me. Her breath caught for a second. You mattered to me too. Human. More than I ever planned. Nick took a small step closer. I don't know what happens next, but I don't want this to end here. Zalira looked at him, her voice quiet. Then maybe it doesn't have to. You mean that? She nodded. Maybe we don't have to understand everything right now. Maybe it's enough that we both feel it. Nick smiled. Then when I return to Earth, will you come visit someday? Yes, Zalira said. I want to see your world. I want to understand the place that made someone like you. They stood together. 2 people from different stars. Different paths but connected by something neither could explain fully. As the day slowly turned to evening, they sat under the silver tree, talking about small things, Earth foods, Dravari customs, favorite colors, and strange jokes neither fully understood. But it didn't matter. The important part was being there. Together. When night came, Zalira looked up at the stars. The sky feels different now. It's the same, Nick said. We're just seeing it with new eyes. She turned to him. Thank you. For what? For not giving up, even when I pushed you away, even when I said you couldn't reach me. Nick smiled. Sometimes, all someone needs is a chance, and that's what he had given her. And that's what she had given him too. The next day, the shuttle rose into the sky. Nick sat by the window, looking down at the world that had changed him, and standing below, watching until the ship vanished, was Zalira no longer just a warrior, but someone who had opened her heart to something new. In the vastness of space. Sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from war or weapons, but from one quiet voice that simply refuses to give up. And somewhere, deep inside both their hearts, they knew this was only the beginning.